Okay, committee, we are waiting on a committee member or two, but I will go ahead and call the meeting to order of the House Higher Education budget. So before we get started with kind of the meat, I will tell you that Shirley has provided everybody with the budget bill. I mean, this is it. And things that relate to higher education are on page 129 to 169. And then the capital budget, page 234 to 243. Page 234 to 243. And the Kansas Board of Regents begins on page 157, if you want to look at that. But I think it's important for all of us to understand this is what we're doing. And as you know, kind of my goal this year is for everyone to understand the budget process. Wherever you were, I know some people understood it very well. This is just to take you to the next step and make sure everyone understands it a little bit better every time. If you all remember, Shirley did the budget analysis for the post-secondary education statewide. We got this last week. Is that last week? Yeah. And so that may be the place where you have questions. I'm going to wait just 1 second because I said I would wait to introduce our presenter. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters because the vice chair is walking in, so it's great. No, that's okay. So committee, I do want to remind you that we had to change the agenda around just a little bit today. So today's Wednesday, we have the Board of Regents. Tomorrow we'll have 2 universities, and then we will have one again on Friday. So we're meeting on Friday, just to remind everybody of that. And then also I want you to remember that on February 21st, we'll be doing our recommendations. It's the last day for the committees to meet. If you have any amendments, if you have anything you need to talk to the revisor about, make sure you do that before those recommendations on February 21st. Okay, so now we will welcome Dr. Blake Flanders to the podium. Welcome to the committee, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. We're glad you're here and looking forward to your presentation.
Good to be here. Thank you, Chair Humphreys, Vice Chair Wassinger, Ranking Member Woodard, and I'm pleased to be here to talk about the higher ed budget. I have a kind of a PowerPoint that's been printed out that I might just use as organization to go through. I've included a brief Regents timeline there on the first couple of slides, just to show you that the universities have been around for quite a long time, and you see a little bit of the origination and evolution of our university system there. We have some community colleges that have been here for a long time as well, and then many of the community and technical colleges in the 60s is when that act was passed federally and really expanded those systems. And then you see when the constitutional amendment in 66 was approved with a 9-member board. But the board really changed in 1999 with Senate Bill 345. And rather than just, and I say just, it was still a big responsibility, rather than solely governing the 6 state universities, the legislature put essentially all of higher education in one form or another, with the exception of the independent colleges underneath the Board of Regents. The independent colleges represented by Matt Lindsay are many of those church-affiliated colleges. Many are on the I-35 corridor. So we govern the 6 state universities. We coordinate the community and technical colleges. And we're also responsible for the adult education programs, GED testing, and we regulate the private for-profit institutions. Some of you might know some of those, such as Phoenix or the for-profits, but they're not to be confused with the independent colleges here in our state. We also, on the next page, I have a picture of the board just so that you can see some of the board members. and they serve come from all areas of the state. And then I do outline some board roles and responsibilities. We have the state financial aid programs. We'll talk a little bit about those today. Our career technical education programs are actually really have some leadership with the Kansas Post-Secondary Technical Education Authority. And that originated in 2007, where the legislature felt like we just needed a greater focus on career and technical education at the post-secondary level. That board, if you will, works under the auspices of the Board of Regents and really does a great job in that space. We have federal Perkins funding, which is actually Carl D. Perkins funding that supports those programs as well, and the retirement plan. We're really a one-stop shop. One of our big value adds is the data component. We have a comprehensive database with all types of student information, employment information. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we have the very best website in the nation in terms of being able to tell where students are. So you can see, if you look at any degree field that we have, whether it be a community college degree, a technical college degree, or a university degree, you can see what percent are employed in Kansas, how much they're earning after a year, how much they're earning after 5 years, and how much that education cost them, and what was the average time for a student to complete. And so we want to keep that information as consumable as possible. And certainly if any of you have questions on how to navigate that on your own, be sure and ask us. Generally, we get the request through, sometimes I'll get a request through Shirley, and so that's fine too. We can do it either way. Other items that we had in terms of responsibilities, in addition to the governing, coordinating, and regulating, we're also in charge of ensuring smoothest transition from our 2-year colleges to our 4-year colleges. We now have over 100 courses that transfer course for course. We know that's an area where we can always grow in, and we need to do more in terms of program articulation. But certainly a lot of growth in that area over a number of years. We also review, we present the unified budget. So any of the budget requests from the community colleges or technical colleges or our universities come through the Board of Regents so that you're able to get a unified budget. So then if you go to, I believe it's page 6, I just show you some of the students that we have enrolled from 2020 and 2021. You can see we've had decreases there. I'd like to talk about what I think's been the impact of COVID, and then really what are some longer term trends that I feel like we need to really address. There's going to be a day when we're beyond COVID, so we've done our best to address that current storm, if you will. But then there's some other trends that I think are a little bit longer term. You can see the number of credentials. We track that, how many we award. Short-term credentials and certificates, primarily. Many of those are career and technical education certificates where an individual might come in and get a certified nurse aid training that might just be perhaps 100 clock hours long and go right to work in a long-term care facility, maybe not get a degree at that time. But many nursing programs require that in order to enter that field, so it's more of a stackable credential where then that person might say, well, I think I'll go ahead and become a licensed practical nurse. They might complete that, might move ahead to become a registered nurse at the associate degree level, and then on up from there.
Could I just ask a question?
Sure.
If you don't mind. On page 6, those numbers, academic year and the talent pipeline, is that the universities plus the community colleges plus Washburn and the technical? That is everyone in higher education in the state of Kansas?
Public higher education.
Okay, so it doesn't include the
I
independent?
don't believe we have the independent. Now, we do have independent credentials in there. I don't think we have that in that number.
in the number enrolled? or in the-
We do track the independent college numbers, but they don't actually share unit record data with us.
Okay, so this would be all the students enrolled in everything except for the independent colleges?
Yeah, and it doesn't include the for-profits either.
Okay,
It would be our public system.
okay. Maybe we can ask that of Matt when he comes. Okay. Sorry, one other question. Coordinate 32 public institutions. Is Washburn included in that 32?
Washburn University has their own governing board, they're a municipal university, really maybe unique nationally. And we would coordinate them similar to the way we coordinate the community colleges and technical colleges.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. If that's
No, that's fine.
Kind of do it that way if anyone has any questions as we go along rather than.
That's great.
Okay.
And one big component of that, so people say, well, what's the difference between governance and coordination? And I can tell you, we argue about that internally all the time. But really, one big factor is with governance, we hire and evaluate the president and chancellor of the university. We also set tuition. And so then if you wonder about, well, who sets tuition for community colleges? Well, they have a local board of trustees that's elected that would set tuition for them. So we have, one of our responsibilities is to develop a strategic plan for higher education, and we have done that. We have, if you look at page 8, we have the plan Building a Future, and we focus on 3 pillars. How can higher education help Kansas families, and how can we help Kansas businesses, and what can we do to increase economic prosperity in Kansas? And if we look at families, we really think about how do we increase access, affordability, and success. It's about more than just affordability in terms of access. Affordability helps people get into higher ed, but it doesn't ensure that they're successful. And then we don't just want enrollments in higher ed. We'd like people to complete credentials, and we'd like people to complete credentials on time. And actually, we spend a lot of time on tuition, on setting tuition. But one way for Kansans to make education less expensive is to complete on time. So if the longer you go and the longer you're out of the labor force without your credential, it's costly to the individual. On page 9, I have some information from the Kansas Chamber. As you all have heard, this wouldn't be new to you. The talent pipeline is important to business. They're clamoring for more talent. And we've had I think some initiatives that have had a lot of success. The first one I'd like to talk a little bit about, as you see those bullets on page 9, is Excel in CTE, or Excel in Career and Technical Education. Some people still refer to this as Senate Bill 155. Although I was there, the House actually spent a lot more time on it, and then it just went over to the Senate, or it was a Senate bill, and so they get the credit for it. But it is where we have state-supported payment for individuals that are typically juniors or seniors in high school to take career and technical education, training and education. And it's been a really good program. Before 2012, we had some students participating in that program. We had about 3,500 to 3,800 participating in a year. And it stayed steady around that number. Sometimes it would waver just a little bit, but it stayed pretty steady. 2012, we implemented that program. And I think at the peak, it came down a little bit during COVID, but we've been over 13,000 of individuals who are participating and completing credentials in career and technical education. So that's been, and that's delivered exclusively by our community colleges and our technical colleges. We've also had the nursing initiative since about 2006. The legislature asked the system, both at the associate degree level and the baccalaureate level. And it's really one of the only credentials that I can think of right offhand where the credential's the same. You're a registered nurse, whether or not you're a BSN or an ADN, you actually get the same registered nurse credential. And they said, we need to create 250 more slots in these programs. That was the goal. So they put some money there, and then we had a competitive match. And the system actually created 250 more graduates per year. So it's much easier to create slots than graduates because not everyone graduates. But we've really had a lot of success with that initiative. That might be one that I know our board has said we might want to take a look at again, is how can we, some of these, I'll call them essential employees or some employees that have been certainly in that healthcare sector, we need to look perhaps at how we can increase that. We've had some limitations because of clinical space, but we've also been able to expand the amount of simulation that we do, and that's really helped to increase the number of graduates. We recently, last year, had the engineering initiative passed again for another 10 years. That happened in, I think, 2010, 11, sorry. And we had 875 engineers that we graduated from Kansas State, University of Kansas, and Wichita State. We were at 875. And the legislature said, we'd like to grow that. And we'd like to grow it to 1,365. And so over that time period, the legislature invested $100 million, $10 million a year, and the universities had to match that with non-state funds. So it was actually double the impact. And we were over maybe about 1,500 engineers. We eclipsed the 1,365. And so again, a very successful initiative. Those are some of the workforce initiatives that we've partnered on with institutions, the board, and the state of Kansas. So on the next slide, we also believe we have the capacity to attract companies and to grow companies through the capacity of our universities. I know that since President Mason's right behind me, they have the SBDC, or Small Business Development, through Hayes, and works with entrepreneurs. We've had companies that have been attracted to the state because of the talent and innovation at the universities and the workforce that's produced by our two-year colleges as well. Our system is a net importer of talent. The one thing we know is Kansas needs more talent. We need, if we're going to grow our businesses, we're going to have to get more talent. Right now, we recruit twice as many in as leave. So if you think about seniors in high school that go out of state to college, we're recruiting twice as many in. Now, what our challenge is going to be is how do we retain those students and how do we connect those students to businesses? We think we have a better plan to do that. But that's something that I think is going to be important. There's really two big entities that can recruit talent in, and that's the colleges and universities and the military. And I think we need to think about how we also leveraging exiting service members, and we've done some of that through our military portal to get them the education and credentials where they've already done the education in the military. How do we get them a credential and get them through higher ed quicker? And how do we leverage those exiting service members? We also need to look at new populations that traditionally haven't been served as well by our higher ed system, because those are our population that are growing in the state. Those are first generation students whose parents never completed a four-year degree. They're minority students, and now we see this happening with rural students as well. And so those three populations we really need to think about. We've recently, you might hear, and on page 12, that some individuals say, well, I don't think a college and a degree is worth it anymore. And I just give you some data to show that it certainly is. You can look at the median wages of everybody 25 and older. That's whether they've worked 1 year or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years in Kansas. And you can see that these credentials, if you get credentials beyond high school, you're going to improve your own earning power and make a company more competitive here in Kansas. And then I've already talked to you about, again, on page 13, the chamber survey. On 14, I put some of the capacities of our universities in terms of medical research. Obviously, Kansas State has food and ag systems, and Wichita aviation and small business development. There at Fort Hays, Pittsburgh State, polymers and advanced materials. And I would tell you that it's more determined locally, but our community and technical colleges have programs that fit the needs of the local economy and have actually local advisory committees that advise them from the private sector. So then on page 16, wanted to look at some of our changing demographics, and this is information that you already have. We have some counties losing population, but we also have a significant increase since 2010 in Hispanic students, Hispanic residents, and a decrease in white residents. And so we need to think about how are we going to serve the state going forward. The number of students enrolling in college from high school has been decreasing. The pandemic did accelerate the decline, but I don't want to leave this hearing thinking that, oh, this was just an issue with COVID, because I can show you some longer term trends. We have some significant gaps between different demographic groups in terms of access and success, and I believe, and many of us believe, that there's a perception that college is unaffordable. Actually, the Promise Act, I think, can help with that. That was passed last year, in that it closes the gap for students in need so that they can attend college. If you look at the public college going rate, this is for public colleges only. In 2014, a little over 55%. In 2020, it's 44.8%. So it has been steadily decreasing, and that's certainly an area of concern that we have. I've looked at the clearinghouse data because that shows everybody going to college, because I thought, are we losing market share out of state? And we really aren't. So it appears to me that the entire college going rate is slipping. When you hear from Matt Lindsay, I think he would tell you the same thing. So
those statistics that you said just before the clearinghouse, are those in here or?
They aren't, but I can send them to you.
Okay, or could you just repeat them really quickly?
Yeah, I don't have them by memory.
Okay.
Just looked at
Just
them. I will send them.
Okay, that's fine.
I should have, yeah. It was over time. I just wanted to see, are we losing a large share out of state? And it didn't look to be like we were. You know, because I'll hear anecdotally, well, this university's out recruiting this university. I think it's something we have to be concerned about. I know that students at times choose universities because of facilities. Students choose technical programs because they want the program. So sometimes it's the program. Sometimes it's, I want to be in a certain house or a certain, there's a number of things that enter a student's mind.
Thank you.
We can get to the Unified Request for Appropriations now, starting on page 20. Again, I talked about our responsibilities to advocate on behalf of the entire system. We thank you for the state support that we have and believe it's a benefit long-term to our state. And we do appreciate the governor's endorsement of our work in her budget recommendations. In the Unified Request on page 21, the governor recommends additional funds for state universities, for student financial aid, aid to Washburn University, and to the community and technical colleges, and also to our office. On page 22, the governor recommended $45.7 million for another year in state operating, the base state support. to restore FY 2021 appropriations prior to allotment cuts, and adding the inflationary factor, and then factoring a 2% increase in tuition, bundled all that together so that the university's requirement would be then to stay flat tuition. I thought it might be helpful to put in a table there on page 22. You can see what our tuition increases have been for the last number of years since 2015. And really, the board has been very concerned about the cost of higher education. And you can certainly see there in February, or in FY 2020, fiscal year 2020, we were zero across the board, and then we've had some nominal increases since then.
And so that 45 million, maybe there'll be some other questions too, and that might be we get to later, but as long as it was right here on page 22, I've been asking, what does that mean, restoring it to back how it was? You know, that's kind of what we heard. And I wanted more details about it. So, because we did restore some of the allotment already last year. Okay. What do you mean a portion?
Yeah, so the initial allotment was a swap with
right.
And so then I believe some of that was restored.
That's okay. Let's call on Shirley.
Yeah, so
Phone
Shirley.
a friend. She's our friend.
There was also a 10% reduced resources, and the governor accepted 5% of that. That's what was restored.
Okay. Yeah, so
Yes.
that's why I say a portion.
That was different than the allotment. The reduced resources.
Okay, so the allotment and the federal money swapped.
That was in 21
And then she did a 10% allotment,
and 22.
but she restored
5%.
5% back.
But then the legislature restored another 3%.
Okay, so is this 45 million, that extra 2% that hasn't been restored, but then you've added an inflationary factor, and then you maybe factored in an increase in tuition? I'm just trying to understand how we got to the 45.
So we have a general use inflation for the general use budget, which is tuition and state support. So not just state support, but tuition and state support. We put in an inflationary factor. Then we also put in how much would a 2% tuition increase generate? And we said we're not going to do one of those. So that was bought out. So then that entire total was 45.7 million. And I've given you some history on the next page, 23, of what the state support has been to universities, and I hope it's helpful. So so we were, as you can see, since 2010, it's been relatively flat. Now, as we went along, and you can see a little bump up in 2019, there was a state employee pay plan. I believe that was about a 2% increase. You did that as a merit pool. I just want to stop there for a moment. The merit pool is important to higher education because then we can allocate those funds locally to the employees, to high performers, as opposed to the legislature requiring everybody get the exact same raise. So that's where that bump came from. And then last year, it was determined that the state had not maintained their effort for higher education as compared to K-12. And so there was some federal funding at risk unless the state maintained effort. And that gap was determined to be $106 million of what the post-secondary system needed in order to keep pace. What happened is last year, 53 million was provided to universities, community colleges, and technical colleges, and Washburn. 53 million, and a waiver was submitted, and Budget Director Profit could come here and tell you all the details about the waiver. I know that he had a conferee at one of the hearings and talked about that. So that is, we've checked out on the website. That's still pending from the United States Department of Education. They haven't weighed in on that, but the state, if a state was under financial duress, they could apply for a waiver, and so the state applied for a waiver and asked to waive 53 million of that.
Just 50%.
50%. So if that waiver is granted, then it's the same throughout this fiscal year. If that waiver is not granted, then it would be the legislature's choice if they want to continue to access the federal funds to add 53 million, but that would happen actually not in this budget, but in this current year. And then you can see the governor's budget increases our post-secondary budgets significantly from where we've been. I would tell you that if you just tracked state general fund, if you just put an inflationary factor in, staying flat means that you're going to increase your efficiencies because costs are going up. Our inflation is real on the campuses. We've had significant inflation in terms of, you know, if you look at a residence hall, in terms of food costs, in terms of fuel costs, everything related to operating. Well, I imagine businesses are feeling it too, and so are colleges and universities. On page 24, the board began to look at deferred maintenance and has passed a policy to really look at that liability at the universities. Right now, that liability sits around 1.2 billion, and it's actually, we've had to work on exactly how much deferred maintenance that we have. You think about every building and assessing that. We have a process now where we assess that deferred maintenance and feel like we have a good handle on exactly how much we have. We're going to be instituting a maintenance assessment that'll be the responsibility of each university to pay 2%. It costs about 2 to 4% of a building's total value in order to keep the building maintained. So if you think of your house, you know, if you think of I'll just say a $150,000 house would be about, $3,000 a year that you need to spend in order to keep that house maintained. It's the same with our university facilities. And typically, as costs get crimped, the building has no voice. And so generally, it's easier to put off some maintenance issues. But I'd love to tell you that deferred maintenance is a linear progression, but it's really not. So if you don't fix your windows one year and you continue on, then the next year it leaks, and then pretty quick the sheetrock is damaged, and what would have been a repair for a certain amount of money becomes escalated. We actually think that if we don't do anything in 20 years, it'll be about $5 billion. If we stay exactly the same and utilize the education building fund just like we have, but do not add any money to deferred maintenance, we'll be sitting with a $5 billion liability. We just want to get ahead of that. We thank the governor for that recommendation of $25 million, and it would need to be matched by the university, so there would be actually $50 more million going to deferred maintenance. The governor also puts in $20 million for IT infrastructure. I've asked our universities to focus on cybersecurity. I would tell you we have a number of cyber threats, and it's constant. And our database at the board office even, we have people wanting to hack in all of the time. And I've even recognized in neighboring states, we've had colleges that had to shut down for a number of days because of ransomware and because people hacked in. So this is a very real thing that I think we need to address in some way. On page 26, another item funded is $25 million for the Kansas Access Partnership, which is need-based aid. That would also require a match and a collaboration with our foundations, where they would need to raise endowed funds at the same level as what they expend to a need-based aid scholarship. So here's the idea behind that. If you did this for 10 years, at the end of 10 years, you would have $250 million in endowed funds at the foundations that would be for the purpose of need-based aid. And so you're really building a corpus to create a long-term gain while you're having a state-funded program that can pay out and help students immediately. I have from our higher ed report, financial report, I have a graph in there on page 27 that shows where we rank in terms of need-based aid on an FTE basis, which is a full-time equivalent basis. And it's a little bit small to read, but we're beating up Michigan, Arizona, Montana, and New Hampshire is who we rank ahead. And there you see the other states, what they've done for state need-based aid. And so so how did we get here? There was a day when Kansas subsidized higher ed at a much higher rate. And tuition then was kept very low. And so that was what Kansas used as need-based aid. What happened is, as that started to go away, we never put in money for the need-based aid while other states did. And so as tuition increased then, the need-based aid wasn't funded. And so that we didn't get here. What I'm saying is that graph that puts us fourth from the lowest or fifth from the lowest, we didn't get there overnight. That happened over a period of time. The governor also recommends on the next page $1 million for the National Guard tuition assistance. That's been a great program, and I'm sure the Guard would love to talk to you more about that program and being able to recruit guardsmen into Kansas, and that's really pays tuition for eligible Guard members. Our coordinated institutions, Governor recommends $2.1 million for a total state grant of $14 million for Washburn University. And then for the community and technical colleges, the governor has $2.5 million in for Excel in career and technical education. We anticipate those numbers will begin to recover after this pandemic, when our schedules will be more aligned with the high schools, and we think that will be needed to cover the cost of that program. We've also have in there $6 million to finance the state's share of the tiered and non-tiered course credit hour aid. Those courses are delivered by our community and technical colleges. I just generally would say that the tiered courses are generally those career and technical education courses we think about, whether it be welding or electrical courses or nursing courses. The non-tiered are more like general education courses, which would be English composition, college algebra, that kind of thing. Capital outlay state aid, there's $1 million recommended for that program for equipment and facility needs. 16 institutions take advantage of that program. Those institutions are technical colleges, and then those community colleges that have a merged technical college within them, and there's some of those. I'm thinking of Kansas City. Kansas would be one of those. They take advantage, and the way we distribute that is there's a base $100,000 that people receive as a base, and then the remainder of it is based on the enrollment in those technical programs. And there's 16 institutions have that. And then for one-time projects, the institutions recommended $15 million for expanding their technical programs and apprenticeship opportunities. And the governor agreed with that and recommended that as well. And we talked about some of those needs for those essential employees out into the workplace. On page 30, we have our Board of Regents operating budget. We took a small cut in FY 2021 and was carried over into FY 2022. And this would restore that and also recommend funding to help us with a couple of positions. One to administer the Promise Act, and one to help with our capital or our facilities renewal initiative. And we had a short discussion about clawbacks, I believe, in this committee. And what happens is I'm not against clawbacks, and that would be if a student, if you say, well, if we give you a tuition scholarship, you have to live and work in Kansas, okay? But I would just encourage the committee to always think about the size of the award because that matters. I think it works really well on a medical loan program where those are sizable awards and not a large number of awards where you can easily find people and get money back. But as an example, if someone's goes through a welding program at Johnson County and slips over the line and works in Missouri, you have to find every one of those students. And so that requires time and effort and dollars and then sometimes you're chasing a student for an award that might have been $200, you know, and so then you start thinking about what's the economy of that. And then also what happens, if you talk to a business owner out there right now and they have I'm going to say a welding business. So our welding programs at our community technical colleges, if you go to hire someone when graduation is in May, and if you go in there in March, everybody's gone. They might still be in school, but they're already hired. So they've been hired generally in November or December or January, and they've said, you can finish the program, but then I've already given you this job. So you have to, so an employee or an employer right across the line, if they say, hey, I just need to buy out a scholarship, they're having a hard time finding employees anyway. This extends into all trades areas, into diesel mechanics, into all of those areas that there's just severe workforce shortages. Other key items, there was a state employee pay plan. Governor recommends a 5% increase to be distributed. We like this on a merit basis. And then 2 grants in the Department of Commerce, $10 million for economic development grants in support of economic prosperity initiatives, and $195 million for competitive university grant funding, which requires a 1-to-1 private match. And that would be actually administered by the Secretary of Commerce. And then also in the budget, I believe that's in the Department of Education budget, the governor recommended $1.5 million to restore transportation aid. Some of the high school students that attend those technical courses at the community and technical colleges, that provides transportation to them. And then on my last page, I just give you the website for all the data books and enrollment reports and anything you might want to see, tuition and fee reports related to higher ed. I would encourage you, if you don't want to go there, just call us or call Shirley. And we will get you any information that we have. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Thank you so much. So committee, we have about 30 minutes. And so please let's just get going on the questions. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, page 28, your National Guard. Remember we worked on this last year. So it doesn't have a specific amount of applications that actually came in. Could you give us a little 20, 21, 22, 23 of said we were going to pay full tuition, but there might have been some.
Yeah, I just have to get you that information. I will.
Okay, Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we have this information in a packet somewhere, but what is the total spending increase that we're looking at that the governor has proposed for the Board of Regents and what the Board of Regents has proposed?
So the Board of Regents, I believe it was about 105 million. And we do not count the dollars that were put in the Department of Commerce budget. But the governor accepted all of the Board of Regents' recommendation with the exception of one $5 million recommendation. So we recommended the budget to the governor, and the governor agreed with that and made it in her recommendation.
So something like a 10-12% total increase in spending from 2022 to 2023, excluding the Department of Commerce?
Yeah, so State General Fund looks like 10.8%. So the way we would characterize that is that as we looked at the needs of the system, the board heard from all the institutions, looked at our own needs, made those recommendations to the governor, and the governor's budget is what the board recommended.
Do you know what the total increase would be when you include the Department of Commerce increase?
So we did not have the Department of Commerce increase in our budget. I believe we would be over 300 million, but I'll get you the exact number.
Okay, thank you. So could I just clarify before I call on Representative Rajas? So looking at page 23 in the not on your report, but on the post-secondary, the budget analysis, and that if you look kind of in the middle of the page under the chart, the agency requests an operating budget of this. It's SGF increase of 105.9 million, which is pretty much what you just answered.
I missed the
Good job.
0.9.
Yes, okay,
Sorry.
there you go. No, but my question is, that does not include additions to each university. This is the Board of Regents summary of expenditures.
That includes the
Okay, so
that includes the additions to each university as well. That's all in. That's the all in.
I've got some other questions, but we will call on Representative Rajas first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know the commerce in your budget, but I guess a couple questions. So let's talk about this 10 million. You know, I know K-State and KU both have kind of economic prosperity programs. Is this where this funding is going to come from?
That's correct. So the Secretary of Commerce will set the criteria and actually administer the funds. But I know, just as an example, with K-State's program, K-State has goals for 10-year goals to increase by 3,000 jobs and $3 billion capital investment in the region. And so then they want to do that by increasing the number of direct jobs. And then obviously the capital investment. So that would be, those plans would be reviewed by, since the Department of Commerce is the economic development agent for the state. And I think what you're seeing is many companies, as they look to locate here, one of their first and top priorities is the talent pipeline. So whether we're successful recruiting companies, it's not going to be based on our geography. as much as what kind of talent do we have. And interesting on that. So we've worked really hard to try to keep our talent within the state because we do have graduates that move out of state. But when you're recruiting companies, sometimes they view that as a surplus talent that we could take advantage of because there's more talent. There's not as many jobs that those students want. They're moving somewhere else, and we will move to Kansas and recruit them right there. So it's not always seen as a negative when you're recruiting companies.
Yes.
Okay, and then I know for the last couple of years, we've talked about some of these programs, kind of that public-private partnership, and I'm a big believer in that the more skin you have in the game, the more successful they can be. Are you confident now we've had a couple of years to prime the pump? Are you confident if these are approved and moving forward that those public funds will come forward and we'll be able to match and to get the most out of these programs?
I like how some of these are structured because you don't access the funds without private sector match or your own match. So in terms of, if we're going to call it skin in the game, okay, you don't just get to have an idea without having any of your own partners or money coming forward. You have to have that one-to-one match. That's why I really like the need-based aid. If you'll do this program for 10 years, you'll have $250 million in a corpus that's going to generate that need-based aid in perpetuity for Kansans. By requiring on the front end, to your point, that one-to-one match, I think the match piece is really important, and it gets everyone invested. You don't come forward with ideas generally that are half-baked because you have to have match. And I think private sector match is another way. Businesses generally don't invest in things where they think it's going to lose a lot for them. And so those are generally really good projects.
One more, are you ready, Madam Chair? Right, one more.
Yes, go ahead.
All right.
Great question.
On the need-based aid, I just want to make, I know that there's some additional money into that. What role, will there be also some additional funds for the independents as well? I know there was some discussion that maybe the governor just wanted it Regents, and maybe that was just an oversight, but.
Not included in these funds, but I'm certainly not against the independents being able to access need-based aid. And I think that, I think Matt Lindsay would tell you that a one-to-one match is a good idea because we'll get double the power of that as we move forward.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just a quick question in line with that. The comprehensive grant is not a one-to-one match.
It's not.
Okay. So that's the difference between these funds. Okay.
And it's the difference of being able over time to make a fund almost evergreen because you start building a corpus and then awarding based on the interest generated. And I think we can really help ourselves as a state moving forward with those kind of models.
Committee, other questions? Really, I don't want to be the only one asking questions. Okay, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did great telling us things, but we get numbers in all different areas. Have you figured the total decrease in population at the state university?
Over time, we've graphed the number. We haven't looked at it as a percentage. We've been, but I can just give you what's happened over time. If we look at our three sectors, and I have a higher ed by the numbers report that I can certainly send you. But if we look at our three sectors, here's what's happened over the last 10 years. And I'm going to take kind of the COVID sharp decline out of it. So we lost something like 25% of our concurrent enrollment students during the COVID year. And I'm calling those are the students that take high school, that take college credit while they're in high school. So we got back like 22%. So like this year it says, hey, you got a 22% increase. Well, you really had a 3% decrease because you lost 25% the year before. So you have to, some of those wild swings you have to take out. But generally, if you look at the university system, we have been on a flat to slow decline. And the reason it's probably been a little slower is because generally, not the last couple of years with COVID, but generally, Fort Hays has grown, Fort Hays State University. And so they've been pulling us up. And then Wichita State also started to aggressively market their programs down the I-35 corridor, and they began to grow as well. So, but we have been declining rather slowly. The technical colleges have increased enrollment. And I believe that is partially due to, number one, parents beginning to recognize that these technical careers, there's some pretty good jobs there. And two, we had the benefit of a program like a Senate Bill 155 or Excel in Career Technical Education that boosted those enrollments. Their enrollments overall are smaller, but in terms of percentage have been increased. Now, not the last couple of years, but have increased. Our community colleges have dropped more sharply than our universities. And I think part of that is that many of them are located in very rural areas. And even though Kansas hasn't lost a lot of population, we have, I believe it's 85 counties that have. And so if you're located in if you're, I don't want to name one, but if you're, I will. If you're in Concordia or you're in that northern tier, you know, where populations are decreasing, you've got to do a lot more recruiting just to stay level. And so I think and then you can't just look at the total overall population. Let's take Johnson County. I know they would analyze, well, how many students are college age? And so even though the county of Johnson County might be growing, it might be growing with people my age. And then we might not be as likely to go back to college. Now, we need to recruit more adults back. We're also slipping a little bit in terms of Pell eligible students. So we have got to get our access, we've got to have more access to students who are relying on Pell to go to college. And I do think over time, first year is the hardest year to implement, but I think over time the Promise Act is going to help us with growing those enrollments, particularly at our community colleges.
As you see this decline, it seems like, so I'm not picking on you. I'm not trying to. Why are we seeing the budgets go up, students go down? At some point in time, that teeter-totter has to.
No doubt about it. So if you look at our budget line on state general fund now, we like this last recommendation, but if you look, it's been pretty flat. If you just look at where we were in 2009 for state, this is state support for universities, okay? You were a little over, what, 660 million? And we didn't get to that number until 2022. Now, within that time period, there was likely a little inflation. About, if we just said 2.5% to 3% a year, it's pretty significant. Also, what's happened in that time is as the state retreated, didn't really retreat from investment, so I don't want to say we don't appreciate this investment, but as that investment stayed flat and had much less buying power, the universities became much more tuition funded. And yeah, so a decrease in students is of a real concern to ours. And I wish our costs went down with losing a few FTE. Sometimes your fixed costs stay about the same. So people ask me, well, if we waived out-of-state tuition for 100 students, now depend on what program they chose, but would your costs go way up? The answer is probably no, if they just filtered into the classes. Because we'd still have, if you have an instructor and you have 20 students, and now you have a 10% increase in students and you move to 22, your fixed cost may not have went up that much. Now, it kind of depends on bands, right? If you're a nursing program and the requirement is 1 faculty member for 10 students and you're at 20, now that extra 2 students is going to cost you another faculty member. So it's not always that simple, but generally bleeding out small amounts of enrollment year over year really is destructive on a budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you start talking about that, who is it that makes those decisions that you can only have 20 nursing students for 1 instructor? Or is it?
Accreditors. And you have to have programs accredited.
No, I understand that, but where are these accreditors, and who are they that are making all these decisions? And do you ever look and say, I think we could probably have 22 students. We have room for 22, and then being held back. I'm not making a lot of sense, but I'd like to know how
You're making perfect sense. So
just the accreditation, it seems like that's a problem both in K through 12 and higher ed.
So we actually can't make that decision, but you can. So you have many of those state accrediting bodies are in legislation. So if you see that as a barrier, you can easily fix that. Or fix that, not easily maybe.
I thought, well, you fix that and you show me how easy it is.
So I can show you where those are in statute.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
Those are some of the things that I think are both limiting and causing problems for whether it's foster care to higher ed. I mean, some of the regulations and accreditation sometimes I think are not looking at the individuals that need to get things done.
I do think there is a productive discussion out there on, are we sometimes over? So it used to be you'd go to the hospital, nurses did not have formal education and training. And then one day somebody said, I think nurses ought to have a little bit of training, and then pretty quick, maybe there was some accidents or I don't know what happened, but then they said, well, maybe we ought to have different levels, where if your area, you can do a few more things. If you're giving out medication, maybe you ought to have to pass a math certification, because we've had some that have, maybe didn't do the math right. So over time, those build generally with a safety concern, but it should be something that's looked at. I mean, we've looked at, many hospitals now want to hire BSNs, baccalaureate prepared nurses, instead of associate degree nurses. So what we've done is the University of Kansas has an integrated program with about, I think, 9 community colleges where they're delivering the baccalaureate level courses out there while the nurses are also nursing students are also at the 2-year colleges, so that we can prepare more BSNs because the hospitals want to hire BSNs.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Flanders, I read with excitement in my local media newspaper in my hometown that the University of Kansas is looking at expanding West Campus and other areas out in there and going into development of maybe retail and other things. What is the Board of Regents' role in all of that, if any?
Yeah, so that's part of our strategic plan. So what we want to do in our 3rd pillar in terms of economic prosperity is to have the university leverage their strengths. So maybe it might be medical, it might be whatever core strength you have, and then many businesses want to locate close to that, not only to access the research and innovation, but also to access the talent. And then we want to recruit those businesses, and I see that the KU Innovation Park now is what it's called, is really going to expand. I see that as an exciting part of what universities can do for Kansas, because it could be, that can help all Kansans even if you didn't attend the university. You might have a job in one of those companies that doesn't necessarily have is at a baccalaureate level, but is there because that university recruited that employer. And we'll also need the 2-year sector on many of those jobs to prepare for the training and education for those jobs. So it's not always just a baccalaureate prepared person.
Madam Chair, one more then. Is this going to be funded and financed similar to what the Bioscience and Business Center on West Campus is, where it's a partnership between City of Lawrence, Douglas County, State of Kansas, and the businesses that are there? We're in our third expansion of that building.
Yeah, I think generally you'll see, I'll call it cobbled together funding sources. So I think generally you'll see some local dollars. There'll be maybe some of these Department of Commerce funds can be used to leverage, and perhaps even some federal funds as well.
Okay, go ahead.
Going back to the Excel program, and you were talking about the numbers then, that there was drop through the COVID time. Those numbers are back up, but we're still down.
We expect them to be back up, so.
Okay. The those payments are made, and the cost of those programs are put on by the local school district, correct?
No, those programs are put on by the colleges, but students from the local district participate in those colleges. Now, we used to do a special collection on those numbers, but there was a proviso put on last year that we needed to pay the colleges within 60 days. And so what we did is we pushed those dollars out to the colleges based on historic enrollment, and then we will reconcile those at the end of the year after the academic year collection. Okay.
Okay, all right. We only have a couple minutes, but I do have a few questions. So in your, just the Board of Regents office, your own operations, I think what was, in the governor's budget was an increase of $305,454. And if I'm not mistaken, some of that was FTEs to...
2 FTEs.
2 FTEs. So it had to be more than just 2 FTEs, or these 2 people are getting paid rather handsomely.
Well, we had, there was 2 FTEs, and there was the restoration of an $85,000 cut.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. And that was from...
We got cut.
Remember what that cut was?
We got cut in FY 2021, and it just carried over to 22.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I've got to go back to page 23 in Shirley's budget analysis. So what I asked before was this chart that's right here. I'm looking at the fact that it says FTE positions 63.5, you know, for FY 2023, salaries and wages is, you know, approximately 5.7 million. So that is the amount of salaries and wages in your office for 63 employees, which I'm not questioning that. I did the math. It's like $90,000 per FTE. That's not exactly what I'm questioning. What I'm questioning is okay, just for the rest of the committee, y'all probably know this, but when you look at this chart, there's aid to local units and other assistance. That is the pass-through money that the Board of Regents administrates to the community colleges and for scholarships.
Washburn.
And Washburn. So that's that amount. But I'm talking about right under that, the paragraph says there's an SGF increase of 105.9 million. In the sentence. And what I asked before was that 105 million extra, that's for your office. It's not for all the universities. Okay, so this paragraph doesn't exactly go with the chart right above it. Because the chart right above it doesn't, clearly it says there's 63 FT positions. We know there's many, many, many FTE positions in the universities.
It must be disconnected from that.
Okay, so, but this is saying that your whole budget is, $370 million. We know it's in the billions for everybody. I would love an explanation. Thank you.
So this is Elaine Frisbee. I'm Vice President for Finance.
You might want to speak into the microphone.
Lower. Okay, yes. The paragraph you're seeing right below that table refers to, in budget parlance, the operating budget. For our agency and any state agency, that's anything that is not capital improvements. And that would include aid to local units of government and other assistance like student financial aid. So that is, our operating budget is everything that is not capital improvements that we push through to the state universities. So that is not just our office operations, but it's everything that we do. Yes.
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make this a little more complicated. What Elaine said was absolutely correct. If you will look, though, at the headers of each line item on the left-hand side, under expenditures, you have salary and wages, contractual service, commodity, capital outlay, and debt service, and then you'll see subtotal operations. That's their office. Operating includes aid to local units and other assistance, so it's just wordsmithing, kind of. Unfortunately, there's a difference between operations and operating. Operations is their office, and operating is their entire budget, including pass-through.
Not. Correct. And the board's role, Madam Chair, with regard to the system-wide request, the entirety of the additional new money passes through our office. And so when we are seeking funding, the 45 million, for example, for the state universities, it is in our budget, and then it would get pushed out in the next year to the universities. So it would be. It would appear aid to local.
Aid to locals is any money that goes from the agency to another state agency or taxing authority. Whereas the other assistance would go to individuals, and that is scholarship money.
We could easily create you a table.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. base budget, yes. Correct. And I would also just refer, you might look at Shirley's page 1. The table on page 1 would then include all the universities.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so the board hasn't made that decision yet because the money, the board will. I would expect the board to do it how they've allocated it traditionally, by the percentages. Yeah, so that's, the board thought about that during the ask. I'd be very surprised if the board moved away from that.
Okay, Barb, do you have a question, or
Quick one.
Representative
Did
Wassing?
I also hear you wonder what the Office of KBOR budget is? Did you want that separated out as well? Because that's just simply your office.
We can do that too.
So it doesn't look like you're all making $150,000.
It was 90,000 when I added, I mean, that was the average of the 63 FTEs, but
Separate all that out and show you.
that would be great. That would be helpful. Okay, sorry that we went over committee.
Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Tomorrow, we will have Emporia State and Fort Hays State. Thank you to them for being willing to share the time, but we'll be using the whole time because we don't want to cut them short. So, and Shirley has one thing. Oh, and then I have one last apology that I have to make to the
Okay.
people.
Just real quick, I was trying to remember who I'd given the university data books to. I believe I gave one to the chair and one to Representative Riley. So you now have in front of you the other 3 to go with your set. If there's anyone else who wants the set of 4 in paper copy, let me know.
Okay, in committee yesterday, I mentioned the student enrollment of programs, which leads to teacher certification. I said it came from the Department of Education, actually came from the Board of Regents. This paper that shows teacher certifications have gone up in the most recent years. So, okay, other questions? Anybody? Okay, thank you, we're adjourned.